now gone on to become 4,000, a 4,000 plus developer conference. We're a completely B2B conference. We act as a conduit to the game developer ecosystem in the country. Um, and we do multiple things at IGDC. Our idea at IGDC is just to empower the game developer ecosystem by getting international speakers, leaders, companies, studios to come down, share their experiences, uh, offer insights to developers. And when this opportunity came up for us, it was like, how could we do more to encourage more developers to come into the industry? Everybody in the world is now excited looking at the Indian game industry for all that it has to offer, and we just need more talent to come in, and we're happy to like support this initiative. Uh, we've got Saikat, of course, talking to us. We've got a whole bunch of activities lined up um, over the next 10 days, and culminating with, of course, the finals, and then the winners also get to come to IGDC and experience what the energy of the game developer industry in India. Uh, we have Saikat, who comes with a big background in gaming over the last few years. Of course, now he is at Nasara, but he comes more than 6 years of experience in gaming. Started off with Glue Mobiles, electronic arts mobile division called Glue Mobiles, and then went to Garena, all of Spitfire, and then now with Nazara, of course, as VP of Mergers and Acquisitions. He also, incidentally, at IGDC is one of our industry volunteers and helps put the business track together, and he's a big advisor for the games industry as well. Saikat, over to you.
Hey guys, hi, good evening everyone. Thank you for the kind words, Saransh and Macha. Pleased to be here uh, and lovely to have this conversation with you guys. Happy to share any inputs, insights. As a quick sanity check, there will be a couple of questions spread in between the presentation just to keep it spicy, and would also help you get some counterintuitive thoughts, hopefully. We are also looking forward to have this discussion on uh, understanding the overall game dev, games ecosystem from a business perspective, and try to get inputs, insights which could potentially help you. The presentation is structured in a manner, in a way which caters to the needs of young developers. If you're very, very new into the game development ecosystem, you're just starting and experimenting with things, please feel free to stick around. There are plenty of points that we would dive much, much deeper into. If you're an experienced developer, hopefully you will also get something to uncover through this presentation. Speaking a bit about Nazara before starting the presentation, Nazara is India's only publicly traded gaming, esports, and ad tech company. We focus on large consumer-facing IPs, starting from Nordwin, which has, of course, an H7 Weekender, Dream Hack that Nordwin runs in partnership with ESL, and a bunch of different consumer-facing IPs in the esports arena. We're the largest esports player in India. On the gaming side, we have franchises like World Cricket Championship, Kidopia, Animal Jam, just to name a few, and we're constantly adding more. And on the ad tech side, we look at performance and programmatic marketing companies. So if you're a developer who wants or are seeking to work with an ad provider or user acquisition manager, please feel free to reach out. I'll connect you with the relevant folks. Without further ado, we can potentially start the presentation for today. Let me screen share. Guys, let me know in the chat if you can hear. And Saransh, Macha, please give me a go ahead.
Hey folks, just drop a thumbs up if you can hear us properly, and then we can get started.
Good to go?
Just a minute. Yeah, I think we are good to go. Let's go.
Cool. Welcome to this wonderful journey of game dev. Hopefully you have fun. But even before we begin, just quickly queue up the question number one. Just a quick check, guys. Wanted to understand from you which amongst the four verticals of media, which is games, books, movies, and songs, do you feel is the largest from a revenue perspective globally? Just give a quick answer.
So we have dropped the poll in the chat. You can quickly select your answers. just to make this a little more interesting and interactive. Nice. So Saikat, I think 75% of the members here feel that games is probably the largest
Wow,
part
awesome.
of it.
Awesome. You guys are rocking today already. So start with the bang. Definitely for sure. Games is the largest amongst them all. But did you know that all the other formats of media combined, games is even bigger than that? So on one hand, you have movies, which is contributing $77 billion a year. You have books, which is slightly higher than movies, maybe a little counterintuitive, but 78 billion, given the day and age we are living in. And music, which we always know is a smaller segment. Nobody here subscribes to Spotify or Ghana or other platforms. I mean, people do, but not large segments as they do with Netflix and other OTT platforms. Uh, but the interesting fact is, it is the gaming industry or the interactive media industry is bigger than movies, books, and music combined. If you look at the larger trends on gaming ecosystem, we have consistently been growing. Ever since COVID broke out, we witnessed a breakout of revenues in 2020, jumping from 146 billion to 178 billion. And even after that, the baseline has not shifted. So we are consistently performing above COVID levels, which indicates a very interesting trend that the users which the gaming industry onboards, they stay gamers for life. They play, they interact with multiple media formats, they experiment with multiple genres, and eventually they try and become a gamer of sorts. The major markets globally are Asia Pacific, which is the largest market. Of course, you have China, Japan, South Korea, three of the largest gaming markets globally in that region, and therefore it is consistently the biggest global gaming market overall. Then you have North America, of course, led by US as the primary market in that region. The interesting trend here to note is that Latin America, Middle East, and Africa, which are predominantly the emerging markets, including India, of course, is growing at a significant pace. Eventually, we are hoping that the market will be reasonably sizable, given some of the larger Western European markets fairly soon. We are poised to grow to 205 billion by 2026. We are currently doing $184 billion of overall revenues. Now, this revenue combines multiple platforms, starting from mobile, PC, console, as we'll see in a couple of slides later. Let's focus on major platforms and major monetization models. Now, this slide here will give you a broad overview of the business. We will, of course, dive deeper into each and every one of those payment modules, business models, platforms in much more detail going forward. So this is just an overview slide. But if you look at the overall evolution of gaming as an overall sector and segment, imagine a time in the early 1900s. You had arcade systems, which means you had to visit your nearest malls, you had to insert a coin, maybe first buy a coin, then insert a coin, and then start playing. Eventually, that added to a lot of friction to users who would eventually want to interact with gaming overall. Then came the advent of early era of consoles and the entire console war between Nintendo, Sega, and multiple other entities. Then it was further democratized by handheld devices, uh, eventually leading way to PCs because PCs were readily available and people wanted to use PCs as a major gaming device and platform. It gave rise to PC as a major platform for game distribution and consumption, eventually leading rise to mobile with the advent of smartphones, of course. And now going forward, we are seeing AR and VR as also one of the major areas and platform shifts that eventually could happen. The one way to look at this particular slide would be to democratize gaming in general. So anything that democratize the way players experience games or engages with them is essentially the next trend that you should ideally look for. Now, looking at that as a primary hypothesis, look at the various monetization models. So in the arcade, clearly it was premium. In console and early handheld devices, again, it was premium. Premium means where you need to pay to buy the console, you need to pay to buy the games, and then you can start enjoying those games. Eventually, with mobile, we saw the rise of free to play. primarily with the advent of microtransactions and in-app advertisements. We will dive deeper into the same as well eventually. We saw the advent of advertisements in a significant manner in from starting from 2015, 2016 with the advent of hyper casuals in the mobile arena, uh, and eventually leading into other formats of casual game in general. And now we are seeing newer formats, which is real money skill based gaming, which is Web3 play and earn and own concepts, which are also getting a lot of traction. Now, the way to look for any of these models would be how can it democratize my players? How can it make the access of the games easier into their hands? And how can they enjoy those games going forward? Let's dive deeper into the total revenue by platform. Of course, mobile is the biggest revenue driver, and it also enjoys a large share of overall number of players globally. It's not surprising, primarily given the fact that a lot of women, female players are also enjoying on games, which they typically do not on PC and console. Of course, that's not a norm. People have started enjoying, and female audiences have started enjoying with on platforms like PC and console as well in a large way. Uh, but PC and console are still much more relevant when it comes to game distribution and monetization. The models, the content format, etc., will differ, but purely mobile is leading the markets for a couple of years now, and going forward also we believe that this will be a dominant platform for distribution and consumption. Let's dive deeper into the PC and console era. Look at the top 5 charts on PC and console era across multiple platforms, of course. So on the PC, you have Fortnite as the number one, and across all platforms, Fortnite is the number one game, uh, which is which is an enormous feat for a game to achieve. But look at other games which are in the top 5 list. Every platform on PC and console ecosystem has very different genres of games that player enjoy and engage on those platforms. On Nintendo Switch, you have much more casual adventure games. Zelda, Tears of Kingdom, Super Mario Wonder, Mario Kart, Minecraft are the primary examples there. But if you look at PlayStation, GTA, Call of Duty, EA Football, uh, on PC, people do enjoy shooters a lot, Counter-Strike, Fortnite. Then you have platforms like simulation platforms like Sims. Then you have experience platforms like Roblox, Minecraft, etc., which are also getting a lot of prominence. So while developing a game, you should always look for what platform you want to eventually cater to. Of course, it is not in any way restricting you to not venture into PlayStation or Xbox or Nintendo Switch, but launching in these each and every one of these platforms on the PC and console segment takes a lot of effort, porting requirements, etc. So you should definitely keep a mind of which are your primary target audience that you're developing the game first, and eventually start building for other platforms within the PC and console segment. These are some of the genres within the PC and console segment. So if you're starting new, if you still are not aware about various genres, this slide could potentially help you. On one hand, we are all aware about the action genre, Doom, GTA 5, etc. Primarily any shooter game could be classified in the action genre, but also team fight tactics, no, not team fight tactics, although shadow fight, etc. could also be categorized as action uh, genre. Then you have adventure with The Witcher, Red Dead Redemption as the primary examples. On the casual side, you have Stardew Valley and Among Us. You have simulation, which are realistic uh, world activities simulated in a gaming environment. Microsoft Flight Simulator is a great example of that. And then you have sports and racing with the titles like FIFA, NBA, Forza Horizon, F1, etc. are really great examples of it. And then multiplayer, massive online platforms, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy are some of these platforms. The reason why this particular slide is primarily important is for you to understand what are the kind of genres that you would ideally want to make your games in, and eventually trying to get examples, play these games, understand what makes it different, understand why they are successful in the overall market, and based on that, you can decide on the overall development strategy that you ideally need to adopt and deploy. Suppose, for instance, if you're building an MMO game, a lot of focus needs to be given on player progression, economy, balancing, and bunch of different things. And it can actually be launched as a free-to-play game on PC and console arena. But if you're developing an action game or an adventure game, primarily Red Dead Redemption or the Witcher 3 type games, it requires a lot more nuanced on narration, uh, world building, and active puzzle solving within the game ecosystem, which may or may not be feasible with a free to play mechanics. So, choosing business model, choosing mechanics, balancing them, etc., needs a lot of attention and focus on. And therefore, choosing the genre is your first step towards building a great game on any of these platforms. But this is primarily discussing PC and console. Some of the stores where you can actually list your games are Steam, Epic Games, GOG, Microsoft Store, Humble Bundle, and itch.io. Each and every one of these platforms have their own advantages and disadvantages, but it's a great way for you to explore multiple platforms that are available today so that you can reach your users at the right platform at the right time, increasing your overall chances of success on any of these platforms. Now let's look at the monetization models on PC and console primarily. On one end of the spectrum, we are all aware, if you are or have ever been a gamer, you all know about premium games in general. Premium games are the games which are full-featured games. You pay to start downloading and playing the game upfront. So there's no microtransactions, there is no advertisements, no subscriptions, nothing. Some premium games do offer subscription services, which is primarily classified in live services pay to play segment of the premium games. These are the games where you need to pay, but you also need to pay continuously in forms of microtransaction or in-app purchases, where you can access more and more content going forward. Because the revenue streams are bulky on premium side, because once you go launch the game, there's a huge lump of revenues that you can generate upfront. Eventually, as the game ages, the purchases becomes less and less. In order to augment or boost any IP, developers have come up with a unique way to launch DLCs. DLCs typically are either an extension, editor's cut, things like that, which gives you new experience with the same content and same characters, which you can enjoy. DLCs are an important way to monetize, and as you can see, 12% on PC and 8% on console and 23 were contributed by DLC themselves. So it's still a significant revenue driver for PC and console games. As I mentioned in my previous slide, massive multiplayer online games, MMO games, typically have free-to-play models, or they can run free-to-play models easily. And free-to-play is getting a lot of traction in the recent years on PC and console platform. Free-to-play, also known as microtransactions, also known as in-app advertisements or in-app purchases. These terms are used interchangeably, but they contributed 30% on PC markets and 33% on console markets, and is a sizable portion of overall revenue streams on PC and console. And then last, you have subscriptions. These are typically your Xbox Pass and examples like them, where you can access a bundle of content by paying a monthly subscription fees. These models are good for very high gaming users who typically like to enjoy multiple games, like to access new content, like to try out content before making a decision whether to purchase the games or not individually, etc. And subscription-based model is typically also popular amongst those category of users as well. Now let's dive deeper into the mobile markets. On mobile, you have a very, very interesting market to look at. If you look at the major segments on mobile, it is match three, primarily in the Western markets, of course, and we'll come to the Eastern markets soon and try to understand the difference between the Western and the Eastern markets. So on one end of the spectrum, you have genres like match, which is an extremely, extremely important genre and the top grossing genre on mobile segments, primarily in the Western markets, which includes geographies like US, Germany, France, Spain, and the likes of them, which are the top 4 or 5 biggest markets, including UK as well. Social casino, again, is the second biggest genre when it comes to mobile free-to-play game. Strategy is the third biggest, RPG is the fourth, both of which saw slight decline in terms of overall revenues, but simulation and other category are typically the one that are the smaller segments. The other includes categories like parties, other puzzle genres, platformers, etc., idle genres, arcade genres, and others in that particular segment. When looking to make your game, try to understand who your target audience is going to be and how are you going to give them the experience that they have not enjoyed in any of the existing games. Try to create your own white space, try to understand why those white spaces exist, and try to explore and exploit and experiment on those white spaces, which will give you a higher degree of success. Now, we have looked at the Western markets. Now, look at the Eastern markets. RPG, which was clubbed in the previous slide, which was clubbed in the others segment, is actually one of the biggest segments by grossing revenues in the Eastern markets. If you look at Match, it is the fourth biggest market, and social casino is non-existent in the Eastern markets. Now, Eastern markets typically is Japan and South Korea. China data is a little difficult and tricky to get access to because of multiple stores that are present. But look at the kind of genre preference each of these markets have. If you are building a game, try to have a clear vision of which geography and which genre you want to primarily focus on. If you are building an RPG game, try to see if you can actually make an RPG game for Eastern markets. If you are building a simulation or a match game, try to see if you can make it for Western audience or maybe even for a global audience, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be East versus West divide, but try to see what would be your core market and then try to eventually scale it in other markets. So having an understanding of what markets you are catering to will significantly impact your overall design choices, your overall philosophy of making games, and deploying a live services based model. Even before that, mobile games typically are free to play basis. Roughly 5 to 7% of global revenues on mobile is from a premium model. Most of the revenues are actually from uh, free to play basis, and that requires continuous work on the title and managing the title through live operations. Some of the monetization models within mobile segments are premium, of course, that contributes less than 5% of overall revenues. Um, Subscriptions, uh, a lot of the premium titles are actually now a part of any of these subscription modules. So you have Apple Arcade, you have Netflix games. By the way, if you don't know, Netflix has a good library of games. So do go and check out these games. There's a lot of good learnings that you can actually have. If you're a Netflix subscriber, that's a gold mine if you're a game designer, because a lot of these premium content is now available at your fingertips to take advantage of. And then you have Google Play Pass. These subscription-based models typically work in a similar manner. You have a library of games which you can get access to by paying a monthly subscription fee. On the free-to-play side, there are three primary business models. One is in-app purchase. In-app purchase typically refers to microtransaction-led games. Typically, genres like RPG, shooter, strategy, CCG collectibles, etc., are great examples of this genre. One characteristic of in-app purchases is that they would derive 70% or more of their revenues from microtransactions. Users actually purchasing content, collectibles, cosmetics within the game, or even subscribing for monthly passes and other things. The second model is in-app advertisement. In-app advertisement games are unique by their nature. Typically, the defining characteristics would be that a game is deriving 80% plus of their revenues from advertisements alone. Typically, they have very light purchase and collectibles and items and things which actually user would need to purchase. They are also the games which would, so the light purchase metric or layer that they would have, a monetization layer they would have, would either include no ads features or include very low cosmetics, some character changes, things like that, which can easily be achieved by grinding the game a little. The other defining characteristics within in-app purchases, which is in-app purchase, in-app advertisement, casual games, these are the games which have very, very high retention and good organics. So any word game that you can take. So notable examples are Play Simple, Funcraft, any block puzzle games that you can think of, ABI Studios and the likes of them, math puzzles, which is Sudoku, etc. They have very good organic traction and very high retention, even long-term retention, which is D365, which we'll come to in a bit, what D365 actually means. But games which have very high retention typically are the ones which will likely to be a good candidate for an in-app advertisement based model and can generate significant sums of revenue. The other defining characteristic would be the session times would be very high. So you look at any word games, look at crossword games, look at math puzzles games, look at Sudoku, etc. Their session times will also be very high. And that gives them the advantage that it opens up doors for people to place a banner ads for longer duration, have an interstitial advertisements, have rewarded videos in intersectional between games, etc. Because the session length is so high, it opens up a lot of potential for monetizing the users primarily through advertisements. The third, which is a mix of the first two, is hybrid model. Now, this is getting a lot of traction post 2 years back when IDFA got deprecated and people were finding it difficult to monetize or even launch or scale hyper casual games. Hybrid models typically became a good way uh, to engage users for a longer duration. Now, these are typically a mix of in-app purchases and in-app advertisements in a more or less 50-50 ratio, plus or minus 10-15% here and there. But more or less, it would be more than 35-40% of advertisement revenues for sure. So that's the defining characteristic of hybrid casuals. A lot of the games that are being launched by Voodoo lately is either falling under casual in-app advertisements or hybrid category. And this is something that you should look at when you're designing your monetization layer and your game design overall systems. You should look at what monetization model would be suitable for my audience and how can I implement such a model in a unique manner so as to not see a drop off in my user engagement and retention overall. By the way, if you don't know any of these terms, please feel free to drop in the chat. Happy to get you the explanation towards the end so that you get the full view and the full picture. Now, this is a slide which focuses on the entire business funnel when it comes to mobile gaming in general. If you're new to mobile gaming, if you're new to live services games, typically what you need to do in a 5 simple steps is first you need to run marketing campaigns. These are predominantly performance marketing campaigns. Unless you are running, you can run other marketing campaigns as well, which focus on influencers, community driven, etc. But predominantly for any of the larger studios, performance marketing campaigns are the way to acquire users. Some of the metrics, some of the decision criteria that you should look at in this particular stage is how much do I need to spend? What are the channels should I use? What are the creatives that I should use which have a higher CTR and CVR, which is click-through rate, conversion rates, have lower CPMs, etc., that you should look at this particular stage. The primary metric that you would try and measure is return on ad spend, also called as ROAS, and payback periods. Return on ad spend typically means if I'm spending $1 in my marketing budget and I acquire one user, how much am I getting from that one user? Am I getting $1.50? In which case my ROAS is 150% or 1.5x. If I'm getting $0.8, my ROAS is 80%. ROAS is also defined by the time period that you're looking at. So my D30 ROAS could be 0.8, but my D60 or D90 ROAS could be 1.5. So you need to keep an eye on your ROAS numbers. If I'm spending this much, how much should I target? And therefore, how much can I get back? The other concept which goes hand in hand with ROAS is the payback period. The payback period is very simple. If I spend $1, in how many months can I get my $1 back in user revenues? Right? It could be 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, etc. And you need to define your ROAS and payback periods to run any of these campaigns at this particular stage. The second stage is where you get paid installs directly from your user acquisition money that you have spent on campaigns. But you also get organic installs through virality of that paid installs. That is one step which your paid installs actually help and boost your organic visibility and organic traction. But you also get organic installs primarily through App Store optimization, having good keywords, SEO optimization, and things like that within, and social virality, of course, through influencer campaigns, community-driven marketing, etc., that you are able to generate. Featuring by Google and Apple in top apps also typically help you get organic installs very easily and effectively. Although that there are some debates around uh, how featuring has basically lost its sheen, but I still believe that featuring is still important for new and emerging games to get the necessary traction. The two metrics that you would look at are CPIs and K factor. Uh, your CPIs and eCPI typically means if I'm paying $1, how many users am I able to acquire? So if I'm able to acquire one user by $1, my cost per install is $1. My eCPI, on the other hand, also includes my organic users. So if I'm spending one, I'm getting one paid and one organic, my overall installs becomes 2. Therefore, my eCPI becomes 0.5. Right? So which is $1 divided by 2 users that I'm able to get in my game. So that is how CPIs and eCPIs differ. CPIs are only for paid installs, and eCPI, which is the effective CPI, also includes organic installs. K factor, on the other hand, includes your organic installs divided by organic and paid. These are the two metrics that you would primarily look at in this stage to ascertain whether my campaigns are working good, whether my K factor is good, what can I do with my ASO optimization, can I drive my virality, can I include a social layer in the game design, which will come later, so as to increase my overall referral systems within the game. The third stage is your uh, game design loop, primarily two loops, which goes hand in hand, which is one is the engagement loop, second is the monetization loop. On the engagement loop, you would primarily look at balancing the game, how the players are progressing, how the design systems are working, and that is going to be the hardest thing as a game designer that you would ever come across, or a developer that you would ever come across. The metrics that you would measure are retention, or you could also classify it as churn, depending on how you're looking at it. You would look at engagement sessions, session numbers, session lengths, DAUs, MAUs, weekly active users, monthly active users, and daily active users. On the monetization side, you would look at, so if I'm able to achieve a particular retention, how will I monetize those users is a question that you would address in the monetization loop. That includes, how do I integrate advertisements? How do I launch new cosmetics, new power-ups, new passes, gacha systems, reward systems, etc., for my users to monetize the content on during the monetization phase. The primary metric that you would look at in this particular stage is ARPDAUs. ARPDAU typically mean average revenue per daily active user, which is if I'm getting 100 unique users and I'm able to generate $100 in revenues per day, my ARPDAU becomes 1. So this is a metric that you would very closely keep an eye on when you are looking or trying to optimize your monetization loop. And the final, of course, everybody likes revenues, so you generate revenue. That's the final 5-step. Looking at some of the metrics that goes behind the overall game development, at least when it comes to mobile development, free-to-play basis. When you're looking at game design metrics, some of the progression-related metrics that you would look at is, how are my users unlocking features? What is the rate? At what rate are they consuming the content? How should I balance it so that my users are able to enjoy a content for a longer period of time? Because it ties in very closely to your live ops activities, because if the rate of consumption of finishing a level is higher, you need to keep on developing content at that pace for you to keep up with player expectations and engage them over a longer period of time. You should also look at how are the players distributed across levels. If, for instance, in level 7 you see 100 players, but in level 8 all of a sudden you just see two players, But across levels, you see more or less on the average of 100 players before 7, which essentially means a significant drop off is happening at level 8. And that's the reason why players are not able to finish level 7. uh, you should definitely optimize for those levels. So you would also look at level drop-off rates, completion rates, churn rates, retention rates, etc. during the progression metric. In the engagement metrics, you would look at levels per session, how are my users consuming the content essentially. You would look at daily active unique users, weekly active unique users, or monthly active unique users, also called as DAO, WOW, or MAU. You would look at retention, D1, D30, D90, D365. Now, I would like to dive deeper into D1, D30, D90, D365. Essentially, what it means is if today is day 0, I'm getting 100 installs today. D1 essentially means how many of those 100 users came on D1. A good metric for D1 for a casual game would be 35 plus percentage. D30 would typically mean of the 100 users that installed on day 0, how many of those users are coming back to the game on the 30th day, and so on for D90 and D365 as well. A good D30 would be anywhere above 8% to 10%. Good D90 would be, a very incredible metric would be 5%. A D365 of 0.2, 0.3, 0.4% would be a good number for you to achieve. The reason why retention is very important and probably the hardest metric that you would be able to achieve is because if you have a good retention in your game, you are able to engage users for a longer period of time, essentially opening up opportunities for you to monetize your content from those users across a longer time horizon, which is highly likely than if a user drops off on day 3 or 4 or 5. If that is the case, then it is likely that users will not be you will not be able to monetize these users effectively. On the balance side, you would look at places like how are my users earning soft currencies and hard currencies? How are they consuming those currencies? How many attempts per level users are making? What is the win-loss ratio, etc. is something that you would look at. Then comes the marketing metrics. Of course, we have discussed all of them except CTR and CVR. So CTR and CVR typically means once you have a creative, which is essentially a video that you would show it to the audience across multiple social media platforms where you buy the media from, users will click or not click. So the users who are clicking is the click-through rate. Clicking essentially means that there is an intent from the user, and that's the reason why they're clicking it. If you are testing a new creative or a new game idea, anything above 3% CTR on a very limited budget is a good number to target for. CTR essentially means how many of those users are actually converting it into installs. If I click, I get into the Play Stores or an interstitial of a Play Store where I can install the app, and my CVR rates typically would mean how many of those users typically are installing. Now let's look at monetization metrics. On the monetization metric, you have metrics related to engagement. Engagement typically is measured by, overall ad fill rate is one metric that you would try to consider here. Ad fill rate typically means if I have 100 units of inventory today across all my users, how many of those 100 units of inventory am I able to fill? Because you would also need to integrate channels, etc., which would help and come and fill those ads for you. You have metrics like LTV, average revenue per user, or average revenue per paying user as also an important metric. LTV typically means if I'm acquiring user for $1, if that user spends $1.50 across a D365 day period, my LTV for D365 would be 1.5. ARPU also typically means LTV for a more longer time horizon. So if I'm looking at D720 or 1420, which is 2 years and 3 years down the line, that would give me a better metric of ARPU. Depending on how you are trying to optimize, how you're classifying, these are the metrics that you could customize for yourself and use it as you see fit. On the technical side, you would need to look at build size, load time, app not responding rates, crash rates, frames per second rates, etc., along with any of the usage related metrics, including internet, RAM, battery, etc., that you would look at. Now, these are the metrics that you would ideally look at to optimize your game across multiple work streams, which will essentially help you create a good success case.
Hey, Saikat, let's take 5 minutes and probably go through the questions that our audience and viewers might have.
Sure.
We can probably quickly scroll through the slides up till now. And hey, folks, it's open for questions now. If you have any questions up till now that we've discussed or something that you would like Saikat to double down on, let us know in the chat. So Nitya wanted to ask, what is the key factor again, if you could explain?
Of course. So K factor typically means, the broad definition is organic installs by organic plus paid installs, which essentially means what is the percentage of organic installs in total installs that I'm generating in a product. That is my virality.
Great. So we have one more question. It's around what is the amount of money that a game developer needs to invest in Indian market for Google Ads, and also how to realize whether it's working or not. What is the litmus test basically?
So, it's an interesting question.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there are two ways, or there are a number of ways for you to validate, and this is something that you need to get comfortable on depending on the product that you're working on. Some products like casual games, hybrid casual games, hyper casual games have a very short payback window. So you could call after 30 days that this is a campaign that is working for me. While other products like RPG or strategy or shooter have a very long payback window, giving you a sense that this potentially may or may not work. So depending on what genre you're working on, the answer may differ. But here is a short litmus test. You should look at what is the organics retention percentage you are getting versus paid user acquisition, whatever you are acquiring through paid campaigns, what is the retention rates you're getting from those users. If you're running a small campaign, ideally it would be higher than your organics or equal to your organics. If that is indeed the case, then your campaigns are working. But that is in no way, shape, or form sufficient to say that those are successful campaigns, primarily because you may not have enough monetization layer to monetize those users better. In which case, you may say that the campaigns are not worth it as of today because I'm getting a CPI of $1, $2, but I'm not able to monetize the users to engage them over a longer period of time, and therefore it is not a good idea for me to run campaigns.
And
The
Saket, what's
best
the recommended return on ad spend for generally how should a game developer think about it?
So if you are running a small campaign and you're prototyping, testing, and you are very early in your product, ideally a ROAS of 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 is good. And as you keep on improving your product and scale your user acquisition campaigns, you would ideally want to keep a 1.4, 1.5 ratio going forward as well.
Got
So that
it.
is the number that you should ideally target on ROAS side, 150%.
Got it. And a few questions are like lining up around metrics. So, a new game developer, what are the metrics she should focus on, and what are the metrics that you at Nazara focus on when you look at a new game? What are the key metrics that a founder should optimize for?
So if you are looking for a North Star metric, I would say focus on ROAS. And that's the
Okay.
only metric that would potentially make or break your studio overall. And that's the only metric that you ideally should care about if you're just looking for one metric. ROAS and payback periods, of course, because both are fundamentally. So ROAS typically means I am able to generate X percentage of returns on any marketing that I'm making on this particular product. And payback ratio typically means I'm able to recover this money in n number of months. So if my ROAS is 150% in 6 months, which essentially means I'm able to recover 150% of any investment that I'm making in 6 months period. Both of these metrics are important to look at, primarily because it gives you an overall indication of your overall value creation potential that you're doing through ROAS and the liquidity generation that you are creating through payback periods.
Got it. Got it. And in the starting, when let's say a founder has a lakh rupees of budget for marketing, what are the probable channels they should experiment with?
I mean, you could look at multiple ad networks, but essentially Google, Apple, Facebook, uh, if US is your market, TikTok, Snap, these are the potential channels that you should ideally spend your money on. Again, depends on the kind of audience that you're trying to target and the kind of social platforms preference these type of audience have.
Got it. Got it. I think sounds good. We are good to go. Any more questions anyone has? Feel free to drop them in. We can probably discuss them right now or take them at the end of the session. Okay, I think we are good to go.
Cool. Now, I just want to ask a short question. Here are graphs of two products, and this two graphs in front of you shows cohort-wise distribution of users. Let me give you a brief overview of what these graph means. On the y-axis, you have revenues on any given year. So in 21, the company made close to 30 million, and 22 also 30 million, close to same, and 2019 they made close to around $25 million. On the colors that different colors that you're seeing represents the cohort of users that these two products acquired in any given year. For instance, the yellow graph shows in the green arrow the users who actually installed the game in 2021 and what was their revenue contribution in 21. The yellow graph on the red side shows the users who were acquired or installed the game in 21, how much of those revenues were contributed in the year 22. Now, here are two products for you, right? Can you identify the difference in patterns in these two graphs? Because they're making roughly the same, and these are real world examples, by the way. Can you, if you were to go ahead and make an assumption on which is a better product, what would you choose, product A or product B? Quickly answer this on chat. Again, for ease, people who have not gotten it, if you look at the yellow curve, in 21, the green arrow shows these are the
Hold
number
on,
of
Saikant. I
users.
think the folks are submitting answers to the polls.
Okay.
So we have 25-75 right now. Moving towards.
Give it off.
Yeah. So it's 25-75 is what I would say.
In product A, 25%?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, it's counterintuitive. Ideally, you would choose product A or you should choose product A. I'll tell you the reason why. Although they made similar revenues, if you look at the revenue contribution by the cohorts which acquired the game before 2019, is significantly higher in product A, which essentially means that your users are sticking around your product, playing your game, and using it to engage themselves. Product A is not necessarily spending much money on user acquisition and still able to make similar revenues as product B, which probably is making more money. So if you look at the gaps in various lines, so gray is the users who installed the game in 2020, if you look at their overall contribution going forward is significantly higher compared to the users who are installing the app in product B. So ideally, you also look at 2022 period, right? The contribution by users who installed the app and made a purchase and contributed to revenues in 2022 is significantly higher in product B versus product A, which goes to show that in product A, the user engagement is very, very, very high. And therefore, ideally, you should choose product A over product B any given day. And this, guys, is how you define cohorts. Typically, whenever you're looking at LTV, unit economics, and things like that, you would want to classify users in particular cohorts. Now, these cohorts can be defined in yearly, monthly, quarterly, whatever gives you confidence. Ideally, it should be monthly for you to look at it in a more granular manner. Cohorts typically means in the month of, so suppose let's take January 2024. In January 2024, I installed, I got 100 installs. Of those installs, what was the revenue? Suppose I got $100. In February, of those 100 users, what was the revenue contribution? In March, in April, and so forth going forward. So that is a simple explanation of cohort based analysis. And this is something which will be extremely important and useful for you to understand how your users are engaging, how your users are monetizing across various cohorts. And this will also help you understand what channels are working for you and would also help you understand how you could potentially scale, how you could potentially do live ops and other things related to game development and deployment. So this was where we close mobile. Now we would like to take a look at overall gaming ecosystem. Gaming in general, although there has been a lot of hype about metaverse, but we have been living in metaverse within gaming ecosystem. So Legend of Zelda or Mario universe, all of these universes were in and of itself metaverses in some way, shape or form. Typically, a metaverse would include a couple of points. One is social, how deeper you can make these social experiences with gaming, non-gaming, and other allied activities. These are user generated. So if you look at any of the social media platforms, all of these content is generated by users such as you and I, and how games are shaping the user generated content going forward is something that we would explore. We would also explore transmedia, which essentially means how a movie series can potentially impact games and their traction and vice versa. We would also explore payments ecosystem, not too much in depth though. We would explore cross-platform, VR, cloud, generative AI, and how you should and why you should potentially look at generative AI much more deeply. And we would also look at Web3 in general. Let's look at social. There are 4 ways to look at social when you are thinking about developing your own game. You can think about creating a social space for your users to go ahead, engage. Think of it like a lobby. Think of it like a platform where users can come, interact with their avatars and things like that. So that's social spaces. Other social features could be you can enable your game to be played with influencers, giving a lot of traction and enhancement in engagement. You can enable sharing of sharing to any of the other social media platforms, including WhatsApp. So that's another way. And the last one is brand marketing and management, through which you can again use social influencers to drive up installs. The next lever to look at is user generated content. Of course, you must have heard about Roblox, you must have heard about UEFN, but those are not the only platforms where people have been creating games on user generated front. One thing to note about UGC platform in general is Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike in itself is a user-generated content. It's a mod, right? The way user-generated content and mods would be different is how easily you can actually create one. In order for you to create a mod, you need to know about the game's engine, mechanics, its code base, language, etc., for you to essentially go ahead and make a mod. But platforms like Roblox, UEFN, Overwolf, they're making the overall user-generated content making process very seamless. You should, as a developer, look at this because it is just getting started. There's a huge market that needs to be explored and exploited. Similar to it is, you can equate the current times to similar to the times that in the early YouTube days, probably when it has still not blown up out of proportion. But user generated content can potentially give a new shape to overall gaming in general going forward. These are some of the platforms you should definitely go ahead and check out. What is the developer share? How can I earn revenues by making games on these? And making games on these platforms is very easy and it's very cost effective as well. I've heard even in the US, people have been generating or making games with less than $10,000, $20,000, potentially even less, and making a blockbuster games on these platforms. The next segment is transmedia. Within transmedia, just look at this graph. It shows that I'm not sure if you have watched Fallout series, but you should definitely if you haven't on Amazon Prime. But Amazon, once it releases the series on in the month of April, the game's MAU overall, Fallout 3, Fallout, there are 3, 4 franchises in the overall Fallout series. All of them have seen 700% increase in their overall active user base. And this goes on to show that a launch of a series or a movie can potentially impact your game's engagement, even though your game has been launched for or has been launched for a considerable amount of time in the past, but it can still get a lot of unique traction at that point of time. People just loved Fallout series, or even on Amazon Prime. Some of the other series that are coming out: Borderlands, Sonic, Minecraft, Ghost of Tsushima, Legends of Zelda. All of these are again prominent IPs, and I'm looking forward to watching the series as well as probably engaging with the games again. You all must have heard about Cyberpunk that came out by CD Projekt Red, the famed studio behind the Witcher series. Once Netflix launched Edgerunners, which was a transmedia IP of Cyberpunk, the overall traction of Cyberpunk shot by 250% in overall MAU traction. I mean, just a matter of couple of days. That goes on to show that your games doesn't necessarily need to be in the games ecosystem. They can very easily transpire into a movie or a series business just to engage your users with a fresh, unique format on how they engage with the content. Another interesting study by Newzoo indicates that of the top 50 games that were launched in 2023 on PC and console platforms, 80% of them had an IP integration with them, which goes on to show how important the IP integration has been within games as well, which is the vice versa way of how games engage with other formats of media. On the payments ecosystem, one of the other major development is web shops, which is direct to consumer products. Web shops typically are a way to engage your audience through live ops initiatives. Imagine you have a VIP user. You want to give a very unique offering to that VIP, which is otherwise not possible in a platform or an ecosystem like Google or an Apple. There, web shops play an important role. It gives you a direct connection with your consumer, and you can give them customized offers, bundles, products, etc., and engage the user better, driving up your overall revenues. Larger companies like Playtika, Stillfront, Scopely's of the world, Moonactive, Supercell, they have all been able to generate anywhere between 30 to 60% of their overall revenues, and these are in billions of dollars of revenues a year. And 30 to 60% is still a sizable portion of their revenues through web shops, which goes on to show the power of web shop and how they are impacting the gaming world right now. The other real-time payments, infrastructure solutions, and buy now, pay later, they are not readily or actively deployed in the games ecosystem as of now, with some smaller examples here and there popping off. But we believe that these are also the trends that people could potentially gain immensely from going forward. The next topic on the emerging trends is cross-platform play. Roblox was a game that was not available on PlayStation prior to October of 23. They launched in October of 23, and they are now the third biggest game on PlayStation, which goes on to show that having more than one platform or having presence in more than one platform can fundamentally increase your overall user base and the kind of users you are catering to. If you look at Stumble Guys, which was to some extent inspired by Fall Guys, which came earlier by Mediatonic, Stumble Guys is now a far bigger IP than Fall Guys, primarily because Stumble Guys started with mobile, which helped them get a meaningful traction, but they eventually ventured into PC and console platforms as well, and of course fueled their overall um, uh, uh, toys and merc segments through which they could eventually create more touch points with their users going forward. And it's now a much bigger IP than Fall Guys. So there is a hidden latent potential for your IP that you are going to eventually create for yourselves. If you are developing or trying to develop or are trying to understand the VR market in general, I think it's a very interesting time to explore this as well. If you have an inclination towards VR, there are three key factors why this is an interesting time. The first, if you look at the overall device sold on the VR side, that's increasing significantly, and it's going to go 2x in the next 3 years. This goes on to show that the market size is now increasing. It's a leading indicator to show the overall traction on the VR side that you could potentially observe going forward. Uh, the other two interesting factors are the rise of free to play in VR and the rise of multiplayer. Now, both of these would need a critical threshold of users on the VR devices to enable it. On the free to play side, because otherwise there is less traction for users for you to engage with. And on the PvP side, you would have less concurrent users to actually help you enable a good matchmaking system. This goes on to show that the market is increasing. There's a good potential, and VR is an interesting segment going forward. Speaking a bit about cloud gaming is also something which we are excited about, primarily because it is also gaining a lot of traction, and it has emerged out of its own smaller niche to now become a sizable market. But cloud gaming, you should view cloud gaming as a tech and an infrastructure services provider. You can enable a few things on cloud, but at the end of the day, you should have a good value proposition, primarily because cloud gaming today, the primary monetization model is subscription based. So if you, and as we saw earlier, the subscription percentage from overall base is fairly limited on both PC console as well as mobile segments. And therefore, the value proposition needs to be very, very clear uh, for you to have a good, meaningful business on cloud. One of the good examples is Antstream Arcade. What they do is they bring in retro games, which is the Mario Bros or the old Mario Kart, etc., to devices, which is to platforms, which is device agnostic. So I can play it on my laptop, PC, console, tablet, whatever device I'm on, directly streamed via cloud. Now, this is probably the most interesting bit to this entire presentation, primarily because of the fact that as young developers with smaller teams and lean budgets, this is where you could actually give larger studios run for their money. Generative AI. So primarily what used to happen is it used to be a trifecta of cost, time, and scope. So as a developer yourself, you would have also faced this dilemma of cost, time, and scopes, which essentially says that I can optimize for two things simultaneously, but cannot for the third one. So if I'm optimizing for cost and time, I have to negotiate on scope. If I'm optimizing on time and scope, I'll have to negotiate on my cost. So if I'm spending less time and I'm working on a larger scope, I'll have to increase my overall cost, hire more manpower, etc. Generative AI is a fundamental shift from this uh, dilemma perspective. primarily because it can help you increase or enhance scope, reduce time, as well as reduce costs. So, for the first time ever, developers can now optimize for all of the three factors simultaneously. We are already in level 4 when it comes to studio in terms of automation and deployment of generative AI. AI, by the way, is not new into gaming ecosystem, and for many industries, it is not new. Generative AI is fundamentally the next stage of AI, where in level 4 we are deploying partial generative AI pipelines. It's still human dependent, but it has made a lot of processes, at least in the initial set of concept art generation, prototype generation, etc. A lot of the things a lot more easier. So just think about some of the tools that you can potentially use going forward to prototype your idea, quickly create iterations of the product, and eventually start thinking about from those lens. On the game side, it is still early. I don't think any generative AI games has received the necessary traction. There are some good studios like Volley, etc., which have recently closed a funding round. They are doing incredible work. Some narration or narrative-based genre games are also doing incredible stuff when it comes to deployment of generative AI. But we are still on the procedural content generation level, but we'll soon make a leap of level 3 where the content etc would be generated live through AI. We're already seeing some good prototypes going forward that we can expect. These are some of the tools, but these are not the only tools. So I would request you to go to websites like Product Hunt, Future Tools, Easy with AI, any of the other YouTube channels. There are tons and tons of that available now, just to see how you can leverage some of these solutions, out of the box solutions, how you can customize them for your own sake before jumping on to more nuanced conversation like creating your own AI, running it locally on your own systems, etc. Before those conversations can happen, try and see how generative AI eventually can bring some of the more depth, more engagement that you're seeking in your content. The last topic is Web3. The idea of Web3 is simple, basically. So we started from a physical sales era where all the CDs, DVDs, boxed sets, etc., were sold on a physical sale, which essentially meant that users owned that CD, owned that piece of content. With the advent of digital sales and digital distribution with Steam and app stores, people do not own these games. So if you were living under the assumption that if you've installed a game or if you have bought a game, you own that game, that's not true. You are licensed that game for a limited use and your own personal use. So you cannot, essentially what that means is you cannot sell that. You cannot trade with that particular game, etc. Those are the things that is not possible. The idea of Web3 games is simple. It gives ownership back to players. There are definite use cases, some of which are already existing, like Nookazon, Nook Exchange, etc., for Animal Crossing. These are marketplaces where users can go trade their assets, trade their services for some rewards, etc. But these are primarily run by community-led marketplaces. And then there are gray markets. You would have heard about Telegram groups or WhatsApp groups where trade happens, and those are the areas where the publishers, the developers do not have any access to. But those are some of the elements that players do engage with. So the use cases are set, and we are looking for the next big hit to sort of strike and make a difference. With that, I would close my presentation. Happy to take any questions. If you have, I would love to dive deeper into any of the areas that you feel I should. Please feel free to drop a chat. And these are my socials. You can reach out to me on any of these. Would love to take your questions, get on a call, give you more explanation, more resources, whatever you need. Always there to help.
Great, lovely, lovely, very insightful, Saikat. I didn't know all this about gaming. Like, got to know a lot from this session, and we have a few very interesting questions also. So Divyansh wanted to understand how does one go about researching and finding the target audience, or how does one experiment with game design? Because conventionally other startups where which operate on, let's say, transactional basis, the identification of white spaces is fairly intuitive and easy. One can go about it and make a thorough research, do a thorough research, and identify which sectors to go after, which problem statements to work on, and they can tweak their business model and their startup offerings, whatever.
Yeah.
How does one do that for games? How does one go about designing and also getting feedback or doing experiments in a closed loop, small, fast, rapid, lean manner?
Sure. So I think the first step towards identifying white space in any genre that you have chosen, and that can be any genre. People have made money even in the least lucrative of genres in any of these segments or platforms. So any genre that you're comfortable with, go and play a lot of games on that genre. I think that is where you will actually interact with players of that genre. You would get into the community, you would start surrounding yourself with comments, feedbacks, etc. for a particular game. You yourself would have an eye about a particular game, what you like, what you don't like, what you would love to change, what you would not love to change. So that's the first step. There's no alternative to playing games, interacting with games, seeing for yourself what you are trying to build. The second step, of course, is go do your research. There are many free platforms, paid platforms. So free would be App Magic. Some reports from Newzoo, etc., are free. Some reports from Data AI, Sensor Tower, etc., are also free, which does a lot of good work. But then there are paid resources as well, which gives you very good insights into installs, revenues, engagement trends, which include session time, retention levels, um, etc. That gives you very good indication of uh, what also app updates. So every update you can see the rise in installs, rise in revenues, rise in engagement, etc. So all of those can be used to understand the user behavior in a lot more meaningful manner. That's the second step. And third, of course, is try to make a rapid prototype, go out in the market, launch the product in the market, and see what users are reacting to for your product. Now, there are two, three ways in which you can actually do it. Now, the last step, first one is just make a creative, buy a media for 100 rupees, just run those 100 rupees or 5,000 rupees and run those campaigns on any of these social platforms. If your CTRs are high, essentially that means that users are liking your creative, number one, and second, users actually enjoy the core gameplay that you're showing them. So that's a very easy test for you to do with just thousand bucks. Uh, the second, of course, is actually deploying a product on app stores, driving installs, and try to see if users are actually loving those installs, because sometimes your CTRs are not actually your conversion rates. Your people may click, they may land up onto the app stores page, but they may not install. This has got a lot of to do with ASO and other things. So try to isolate these random variables starting from quality of creatives, app store optimization and other aspects, and try to see what are the users actually feeling about the idea that you are trying to work on. I think those are some of the interesting steps and ways in which people have deployed it. The other interesting way is launch your game on web. There are multiple web platforms. You can get users for free. You would see their engagement, session times, etc. You could also probably earn some money doing that. So launch your game on an HTML5 version on web and try to get users from those platforms that are already present. So some of the platforms are Crazy Games, GamesOp, uh, uh, Pokey, some of the great examples that you can potentially launch your games on uh, and try to see. So those are some of the ways in which people have actually tested out and identified white spaces. But the answer is iteration and playing.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Divyansh, if you have any follow-up questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat. One thing that is coming up very predominantly in the chat is, Saikat, what's your view on RMG and why does no one, even though a huge revenue in India in gaming is coming from RMG, but still it is not talked about or mentioned enough. What's your view, and what's Nazara's view on RMG games?
Well, it's an interesting segment for sure. And I'm not sure if it is not talked about. I think it is the most talked about in gaming in India, I
Yeah,
believe.
even I feel the same. Yeah.
So I think it is talked about. It is so India is the second biggest RMG market globally after US. So India stands roughly around 1.5 to 1.6 billion dollars globally. Sorry, in India every year annually, and US stands at $3 billion. So India is the second biggest RMG market globally, and there are multiple big players who have done an incredible job in RMG in India. And yes, it's an interesting space for sure. At least for India, it is.
Got it. Got it. One question is, what do you, in the previous slide, you had mentioned games as a platform. What do you mean by that? Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So uh, imagine 4 years, 5 years back, maybe 3 years back. I'm not sure when HoYoverse was launched. Uh, so imagine when MiHoYo first came out, it was just a standard adventure open world exploration game. There was nothing. I mean, the game was beautiful. It was well made, but there was not. It was just a game. But right now, if you look at what HoYoverse is doing in general across all its games, it is now promoting multiple different things within the game and outside of game. Uh, Imagine platforms like Roblox or Fortnite. Fortnite was as in when it started, it was just a game. Right now, it is a game. It is a game engine,
Hmm.
a game store, uh, a monetization platform, events platform, all clubbed into one. So Lil Nas X and Taylor Swifts of the world, and they have all performed in those platforms. So that is what I meant by games as a platform. So if you look at these larger platforms, they all started with one core loop, which was the primary core loop. Fortnite still today is the world's largest and biggest games across all the PC and console formats, and the first number one title in terms of revenues as well. They started with Fortnite, and now they have expanded and spiraled out into so many different things in so many unique ways. That is what the power of platform is. So imagine YouTube, if YouTube had their own videos, what YouTube would have been versus YouTube now with you and I hosting this
Hmm.
event on YouTube. Imagine what YouTube is today. So YouTube is truly a platform, and that is exactly what games are turning out to be. And eventually,
Hmm.
we'll see a lot of these games uh, as platforms uh, going forward.
Got it. Got it. I think a lot of questions are still like centered around how to go about designing games as a beginner, how to go about prototyping a game, and testing whether something is working or not. So I think that is something game developers and founders in this space are struggling with. Can you probably throw some more light on this and
So
uh,
I will reserve those questions for the subsequent sessions, which is on game design and product and other aspects.
hmm,
But I would give you metrics, right? I will give you a thought process and the seed for you to actually go ahead and have those attend those sessions and ask those questions and get it clarified from the true experts in that domain. Uh, uh, so from a metric standpoint, you should look at there are multiple ways to do prototype. Hyper casual games, when they used to do prototype, there used to be three levels in the game, and they used to launch that game on the store. Uh, all they used to do was they used to test the creative, and through that creative, they would understand and ascertain what is the power of my core loop. So essentially, if you are looking to do prototypes, of course, you should get it checked and verify my facts and hold me accountable for it going forward. But I believe the core and fundamental important parameter that you should look at for any prototype is D1 retention.
hmm,
And your D1 retention will tell you how powerful your core loop is. There are two loops in any gaming game design engagement loop, which is the core loop and the meta loop. The meta loop and the importance of meta loop would come in D7, D30, and beyond, while your core loop is the one that you should be ideally focused on for D1. So look at D1 retention, look at CTRs, look at CVRs, look at session time and session lengths, and look at total play time. I think these are the 4 or 5 metrics that you should look at when you are doing a prototype, which will eventually tell you how powerful or weak your core gameplay loop is and what are the things that you should ideally look at to improve those numbers. So it has to be metrics driven. So the essence is you have to look at it from a metrics driven perspective. Otherwise, you will get lost and get bogged down in the development process, and you will not be able to make a call whether to scrap this idea or continue building on top of it.
Got it. Sounds good. I think we are done with most of the questions. A few questions are still coming around when do you think India would regulate IP law for video games?
I don't know. I have no
We
clue.
don't do speculation here.
Yeah.
The AVGC policy is coming out, so wait and watch.
Cool. I think it was a very interesting and an insightful conversation, Saikat, and all the interested game devs can connect with Saikat using his socials that are mentioned here, or Macha and myself on LinkedIn. We are happy to like help you in your journey, and feel free to shoot us your questions there as well. Thank you for this. Thank you, Saikat, for taking out the time. It was lovely to have you and give us this session on gaming. I hope
Thanks,
this was
guys.
really insightful for the viewers also.
Yeah.
Hope it was helpful. Thanks, guys. Please feel free to reach out. And all the very best.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Bye bye.
Done. It's